I never thought Beyonce would come. Never. I didn't want to say it out loud because the whole arena has been buzzing all week about when's she getting here.
Save her for October.
Yeah, there you go.
We will never give up. We will never concede. We'll be bigger, better, and bolder than ever before.
We are not going back.
Welcome to the Trump Trials Sidebar from the Washington Post. We are broadcasting to you from the United Center in Chicago. The Democratic National Convention has just wrapped up, and we are recording on Thursday night. They've gavelled out. The balloons have dropped, but they're still popping. We've been joking that we feel like we're in a giant-sized popcorn popper. I'm Libby Casey, and I am pleased to be with Rhonda, Colvin, and James Hohmann, my partners for this entire week of coverage, and what a ride it has been. So, we're here to recap the highlights of this week. Also talk about what Donald Trump is doing in his sort of counter-programming world. He's had a bad night, folks. He's been very distressed, it seems, by Kamala Harris's speech. And then we'll talk later on with our colleagues, Carmela Boykin and Joseph Ferguson, who are members of what we call the Washington Post universe. They're creating content on all social media platforms. They'll come by to tell us about their highlights and how creators have really been welcomed and embraced and given a lot of prominence by the Democratic committee and the folks who are running this. They are recognizing that creators have a lot of sway in the public eye. So let's talk about how Kamala Harris's speech went. James, how did she do?
I thought she nailed it. I really do. I think she gave a pitch-perfect speech that did everything she needed to do. It excited her base. It introduced herself. She's famous but not well known. I think it really filled out the biographical details, but it wasn't a very identitarian speech. I think that was the mistake Hillary Clinton made in 2016. It was all about, being the first woman president, and it felt too much like it was about her and not about you. This speech felt like, here's my background, and here's how that helps me represent you, and I will be your president. I thought she got that perfect. A lot of the crowd was wearing white, understandably excited about, the color of women's suffrage. Kamala Harris was wearing a black, outfit. That was
all
really
black, yeah.
intentional. And then I thought she sounded strong. She came across as very hawkish on national security. She came across as tough on crime. Someone who, as she said, has spent her entire career representing the people while Trump has represented himself, and she wants to do that as president. I thought it was a great speech. It was well delivered, and it does set her up to come out of this week with some momentum and appeal to the people the very small universe of people who actually will decide this election.
Rhonda, one thing that I noticed when people, even like her stepdaughter, her niece, her goddaughter were on stage, and young people talking about she will be it was next president. People weren't saying the first woman president, the first black woman president, the first Asian American president. It was the next president. So even though there was a lot of pride and excitement and hope in the room related to her identity and background, it's all business here. The focus is we are getting her to the Oval Office, and then we'll talk about how historic it is.
Yeah, that's right. You do get the idea that is what, a lot of people had on their mind of the history, but not really talking about it. It just doesn't seem to rise to the level of the challenges the country faces right now. I think that's part of it.
It didn't work for Hillary Clinton.
Right. It didn't work. But again, Hillary Clinton kind of, paved the way to make it comfortable to think of Madam President. And I think people are, and maybe increasingly so, will become excited about it. But I think, the contrast for Democrats is Trump America or Harris and Walz America. And that stark contrast is enough on its own. It doesn't matter the gender. And I think that's what people are thinking. There are just so many challenges the country faces right now. There's a lot of division. I think that's the highest thing on the list right now. She just happens to be a woman.
One of my favorite moments of Thursday night was when they brought on, Kamala Harris's nieces, the two nieces, to talk about how to pronounce her name. And was it Eva Longoria who was with it was another.
Oh, Kerry Washington.
Kerry Washington. Yeah. And she said, look, let's talk about how to pronounce Kamala's name. But then she said, if you get it wrong, that's okay. It's okay to get it wrong as long as it's not disrespectful. Mm-hmm. And I think that showed this grace that Barack Obama was talking about the other night, where like people aren't always going to say things exactly the right way, and that's okay. Because I feel like there has been this sort of like getting angry at people if they don't say things exactly right all the time. And I think that honestly, there have been a bunch of people, including Al Sharpton tonight, who mispronounced her name, clearly not with any hate in his heart, but it's a unique name and it's mispronounced. And so I thought it was interesting the way they teed it up, because they clearly are trying to show middle of the road people or older Americans, like, here's how to pronounce your name. And if you're not getting it exactly right, that doesn't mean you're a bad person, but here's how you're supposed to pronounce her name, because Trump is still out there clearly very intentionally mispronouncing her name. As are so many other Republicans in TV interviews and speeches. They're doing it in a way that is meant to jab and poke. And I thought this was such a deft way of dealing with that, rather than coming out and like finger wagging and saying like, it also just deflates it. It did deflate it. It felt very effective. It felt very... And to have children deliver that message. Exactly. I loved it. Yeah. That might have been a smart move by the campaign.
So, Rhonda, what were the overarching themes and takeaways either tonight in Kamala Harris's speech, or that you've caught throughout this week of programming from the Democrats?
Reproductive rights was something that was a part of every single night. The speakers who were brought in, everyday Americans talking about how that issue affected them after the Dobbs decision came down. Democrats know that's a winning issue for them. I mean, think about it. The Dobbs decision was 2 years ago, but yet it is still something that is mobilizing a lot of Americans around voting on that one issue. I know I've looked at polling. It's still high on the list. Democrats know that. And it's something of concern to even, people who are either moderate or even conservative women. I remember in 2022 doing midterm election reporting, and how people were saying, it just didn't feel right that a law that was on the books was so easily overturned. So there's this comfort around that issue, and Democrats know that. So that was something that has been here. Also, it's just been kind of a winding road of so many performers, so many, entertainers. I just think it was such a mixed bag. It was, I think you said it too, James, on our live show. Sometimes it felt a little bit like a word show or something, the one person would be talking about policy, and then we're pivoting to Little John coming down the stairs. Like, it was like, are we doing the Grammys? Is this
it did feel like the Grammys.
I know, right?
We had the best seat in the house.
We did. We really did. But it was a mix of things, but that also speaks to the moment, right? It speaks to the energy. I know on our last episode of the podcast, we talked about how this was the hottest ticket in town. It became that way after the reset in the election, and people wanted to come. More people who may have wanted to attend 1 or 2 days wanted to stay the whole week. People were added to the speakers list. So it just kind of a jumbled programming schedule also spoke to the energy.
So let's talk about the Little John moment. This was during the roll call of the states, where the states were saying, here's our delegate count. We put our delegates towards Kamala Harris. And it was every state, territory, district. It was showing that, all those different parts of the country. And then boom, Georgia came, and everyone was saying, is that Little John? Let's roll that. Let's re-experience that.
Georgia, how do you cast your votes?
Yeah! Ladies and gentlemen, we are here tonight to officially nominate Kamala Harris for president. Five, get loud, another round of shots. DNC, turn out for what? Turn out for what? Hey, turn out for what? Yeah! Turn out for what?
Little John coming out in style for Georgia. Even if you didn't know who that was, though, the energy just was contagious, right, Rhonda?
It was, and to see him come down the aisle, he, I think he shook hands with an older woman who was a delegate. She's dancing to it. Then there was a younger delegate. I mean, I think I saw Raphael Warnock, a U.S. Senator, bobbing his head at it. It just, it was one of those moments at the DNC where you're like, okay, wow, this is a big moment for this party.
So I have a question. In 20 years, are we going to look back at that like we do on the old Macarena videos of like Hillary Clinton and the rest of the debt, like doing the Macarena, and you're like, oh my God, shameful, just shameful.
His song might last a little longer, though.
I think you're right. I think you're right. That's never going to go out of style. So what other kind of celebrity power? How else did Democrats use celebrities this week, James?
Even during the roll call, when Louisiana came on, Wendell Pierce who was in a show called Treme that was set in New Orleans, spoke for the Louisiana delegation, and it was they were all surprises. There were there were a lot of random people who were kind of popping their head up. Dave Chappelle was wandering around.
Spike Lee was with the New York delegation.
So here's the thing, though. I remember when President Obama came into power, and suddenly the White House Correspondents' Dinner was like this hot ticket, and all these celebrities were there.
So it was like the State of the Union.
Yeah, but I think it ended up becoming too celebritized. Yeah. Is that a word? Too posh, too glamorous, exclusive in a way that didn't feel welcoming. It didn't feel inclusive. So how do Democrats bring in that celebrity, bring in that star power and energy while still making it feel authentic and accessible, Rhonda?
Yeah, celebrities do bring energy. We've talked about how, just a clip of them on social media the next day, got people to click on stories about the convention that they might not have. But there is another side of that coin where you might be isolating folks who are like, well, that group is too cool for me. And, they don't care about the serious issues. It's just, fun and games for them. So you do have to be a little careful and also, a lot of celebrities, there is vetting in politics, and sometimes celebrities do carry maybe messages or baggage that a candidate may not want to be associated with. So you have to be careful about that. And I think just, too much, as we were saying about Beyonce, and how everyone, was waiting for her, too much of that can actually turn some people off. And this is an election that's just going to come down to, handfuls of votes in a lot of states, and Democrats can't really risk that. But that's not to say that some of these celebrities that we didn't see here might not go, they may go on the trail. They may do some sort of other endorsement, but it's a tricky thing to balance.
So I want to mention one celebrity who we saw on Thursday, D.L. Hughley, who had some funny lines, had star power on the stage, but had a really direct message of I doubted Kamala Harris. I've talked badly about her as a leader. I didn't think she could do it, and I was wrong. And he had this anecdote of how somebody said, Google her, look it up. And I looked it up, and I understand now, and I want to publicly and very vocally apologize and say, I am here. I'm totally paraphrasing that.
No, but you got it. And that was a powerful moment.
But it was because it was, and it's a black man, it's a prominent person of pop culture. It's a group of people, young African-American men who the Harris campaign really wants to reach. And it was a direct message from a celebrity, an authentic message from a celebrity.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about how Donald Trump was gaining some momentum with black voters, specifically black men voters. And, it might have been a nod to that, with D.L. Hughley, talking about what he thought about Harris. But he also said the research and telling people, and that's a message for everyone, because there are so many quick clips around AI, things that can promote misinformation in this election. And if you think you know about a candidate, both candidates, you need to find out as much as possible before you cast that vote, not only for the presidency, but also your local races, which are so important too. But I think the campaign wants to, again, just reach everybody. It's about everybody.
And we saw that from the Republicans too, but in the end, they had a streamlined message, right? It was more, it's the Democrats are mushrooming out and the Republicans were pointing the spear in, right? It's all funneling to Donald Trump. It's all, J.D. Vance is like Donald Trump. It's all kind of narrowing the gap and the focus to go after those voters that they need to shore up, to win in the fall. I want to mention one more celebrity before I ask you about some of your favorite, regular, real humans who we also saw. And that celebrity is none other than Oprah Winfrey, who people do see as a very authentic and relatable celebrity and person. So let's listen to a little bit of Oprah being Oprah.
Let us choose truth. Let us choose honor. And let us choose joy. Because that's the best of America. But more than anything else, let us choose freedom. Why? Because that's the best of America. We're all Americans, and together, let's all choose Kamala Harris.
Oh, that Oprah voice just like takes me back to my childhood.
It was so you can see the teleprompter from up here that they're reading off of, and they actually
Did it say
spelled it out.
Harris?
No, it was like
No,
it was. I'm totally,
Oh
totally 100% serious. Yeah, I could see it down there, and she was reading off the screen, and it was like 15 A's. It was like Kamala, and so I was looking at it as she was like getting to her crescendo, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's like, it's not like a typo or something. But then I will say I was disappointed because I thought we were going to get free cars or something. You know, maybe some.
You'll get a car. You get a car. And we also didn't get Beyonce, which was the big buzzkill. Get it? Because that had been really talked up. There had been rumors. There had been teases of it. There had been suggestions of it. And ultimately, no Beyonce, although her song Freedom is a huge part of the Harris campaign now with permission. We also heard John Batista's song Freedom. I thought maybe he might show up, but no luck there either. Let's talk about some of the Americans that the Harris-Walz campaign had to talk about just their personal life experiences. Who stood out to you, James?
I mean, the everydays is what they call them in politics and campaigns. And I do think a lot of those messages really break through because it is like, I mean, people with horror stories. And we heard some individual horror stories at the Republican convention as well, including family members of people who died in Afghanistan during the American evacuation.
You know, I was the family members of people who died in Afghanistan were the ones who stand out to me all these weeks later.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you brought up that as well. Who stood out to you from this convention?
I mean, the gun violence moment tonight was like, I was honestly trying not to cry. And I didn't, it's hard when you're a journalist, you have to maintain your composure. But watching these 4 women in the spotlight, and it's the mass shootings we've heard about, like Uvalde. But then it was also like a woman whose mom was killed by gun violence, and then whose daughter was killed by gun violence, and not in a big mass shooting, but in an unsolved murder on a beach while she was on vacation. And it was just such a gut punch. And a Sandy Hook teacher, like it was. I mean, that was those speeches are just so much more visceral than anything a politician could say. And it is. It's also one of the challenges from like a programming something like this is you go from having those like genuinely heart-wrenching stories, and then you have to like transition to Pink performing, and it worked, but I will remember those.
Yeah, that was exactly mine as well. And because that also happened tonight. And I just thought about it. I had interviewed the Uvalde mother, and have, been on the phone with her. I've interviewed her in person, and just, the weight of that experience. And, it did push her actually to run for mayor, or an attempt to run for mayor there. I've also interviewed Lucy McBath, the congresswoman from Georgia. Her son, Jordan, was killed, in what's called the Loud music shooting, because an angry passenger in a car in a parking lot next to him shot into the car and said their music was too loud, and he died. And that pushed her. She was formerly an airline flight attendant. That pushed her into Congress, and the momentum behind that issue is something that I think Democrats are trying to harness again. They have been successful in taking that issue to local communities, galvanizing support, and making it a voting issue. And it was really a poignant part of today's programming. Also, Gabby Giffords as well. I mean, you're reminded about that devastating shooting. She even talked about how she was called a rising star, and she was in Congress, young woman, and because of the injuries that she sustained, it can't be in that role right now. But some might argue she's in a very important role, and so that is one segment of hearing from everyday Americans that really shone a light on some of the issues.
Somebody else we heard from were the parents of Hirsch Goldberg Paulin, who is one of the hostages who was taken on October 7th, and his parents were so graceful and inclusive in talking about not just demanding that the hostages are released, but talking about how the hostages are of a lot of different religions and faiths and backgrounds, and that they also want to see the suffering end in Gaza.
It was very poignant. I mean, they talked about like how every human being is like a universe unto themselves, and the Gazans. It was a plea for our common shared humanity. That was very emotionally resonant.
Something else that also stood out was the group of young men now not so young anymore, once known as the Central Park Five, now the Exonerated Five. 4 of them were on stage, and they were making a direct attack against Donald Trump. They were talking about wrongful incarceration. They were talking about racial justice with Al Sharpton, but they were directly saying Donald Trump was in part responsible for the hatred and vitriol that came against us when we were innocently accused. And that was, that's making that connection. So where else did you see these people who were brought on stage to touch heartstrings or to be politicians make the case for Kamala Harris and against Donald Trump?
Hadley would be the woman from Kentucky who recorded that ad for Andy Beshear.
Yeah.
It was so effective. Andy Beshear, the governor of Kentucky, introduced her, I think early in the week, maybe Tuesday, it might have even been Monday. And she's someone who couldn't get an abortion after she got pregnant after being molested by her stepfather. And you can directly tie Trump appointing the justices who overturned Roe to states passing laws that are doing that.
Yeah. I also, what stood out to me is some of the people who are voices from January 6th. We heard Officer Gunnell, Sergeant Gunnell, who protected one of the tunnels on January 6th and had a lot of injuries to the point that he no longer is in law enforcement. You had Officer Sicknick, the officer who died. His brother also spoke. You had a couple members of the January 6th Select panel, the committee looking into the investigation of sort of the build up to January 6th and the actual violent attack. I think that was something that brought that back to mind in a way that also showed that Trump was responsible for trying to subvert the election. Yes, there was the physical violence, and that even to this day, when I see images of it still takes you right back. But it also leads to the issue of when he won't accept the results of the election, what will he do?
Yeah, it's not just back looking, it's also future looking. So the big themes of this week: freedom, we're not going back; joy, something we heard a lot from Tim Walz and other people this week, including Oprah, and then patriotism. James, patriotism was a big feature here.
It really was. I mean, it was conscious, but people really embraced it. Kamala Harris in her speech talked about how she's so proud of our country. There was a lot of chanting of USA. They handed out miniature flags. People were holding signs that said USA. And the speakers really leaned into the idea of, for lack of a better term, American exceptionalism that had sort of been out of vogue for a few election cycles in the Democratic Party.
Okay, so Donald Trump was truthing a lot during Kamala Harris's speech. He clearly was watching. He encouraged other people to watch. He said he'd give it like a fair shake or something. But our colleague Rich Matthews was reporting, because he was watching it all in real time, that there were like too many to count. It just kept going and going and going. What does he get? Rhonda, your face is almost like falling. Like you just look like consternation. What does he get out of reacting like this? Just in such a flurry.
I don't know if it helps. I know that his campaign, we've reported it for now 2 weeks, almost 3, that he is not sticking to message to the point that it is concerning, and that it is possible that he might start losing support quickly if he can't stay on message. I remember watching one of his events last week, and he goes from talking about the economy and making it sound like he's being forced to talk about the economy and what his platform is. And he kept saying, they want me to talk about the economy, but I'm going to go to the other stuff soon, the stuff we like. And that stuff that he was saying they like is, disparaging comments about Harris. And, I don't know. And to James's point about trying to bring in new people, the old new people or the new old people into his campaign to try to help, I'm not sure where this all goes, but to hear that he has been truthing throughout this and watching it, but not coming back with any sort of policy attacks or anything, I don't know what to make of that.
He was trying
It doesn't
to hit her on
sound
the
like
border.
he's...
Yeah, he was trying to hit her on the border on some of the truths. But, it doesn't show a sense of self-control and there's no strategy to it. There's no strategy.
And it also shows that he's his campaign manager. Even though he has one, he actually has people who have done this before.
Yeah, but usually
he's not.
You have folks like actually controlling.
Right.
You're
but it does show that
he
he is in control of his campaign, and that's it.
And the Republican Party.
And will he be, we have covered him for so long that I'm not sure that we can point to much evidence of if he will course correct and just stick on message until November. I'm not sure that will happen, but we'll see. I think the Democrats understand that they're getting under his skin. I think having all of these, celebrities, a tightly produced show, they knew those were the things that might bother him. So
Kamala Harris filling the arena where he gave his convention earlier this week. Was it Tuesday night? It all runs together. When there were speeches happening here, she and Tim Walz hit the campaign trail and filled up the Fiserv Arena in Milwaukee where Trump had his convention. So they were doing a twofer. It was a really powerful optic, James.
The shock factor from Trump sort of wears off over time. And one of Trump's, I don't want to call it talents, his feral political ability is to find new ways to shock people. And to grab attention back. And so I do expect that he's going to get really nasty and ugly and go really deep into the gutter. And I'm sure Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, who had gotten him the nomination back, came and joined his campaign when he was really at a low point in 2022. I'm sure they've said, you need to be more disciplined. And that's just not how Trump has won before. And it's not natural for him, and it's going to be fascinating to watch. And I think that's why that debate on September 10th is going to be so interesting, because he's going to come in and he's going to want to come out swinging, and how does that play? Can he control himself? Can he be self-disciplined?
And is Kamala Harris, how does she handle that? And she's going to be ready for that.
She will.
And we saw that this week, that she's going to be ready for that.
Philippe Reines, who was actually would dress in a suit with solid pattern ties, longtime Hillary Clinton advisor. He played the stand-in role of Trump for Hillary Clinton's debate prep. He's reprising that role for Kamala Harris. They actually went to an auditorium at Howard University last week to do an initial debate prep session, and it's about kind of. I think the best way to deal with Trump in that situation is humor, to kind of brush him off. And I think she showed tonight she's very capable of doing that. If you can make it funny, I think that annoys Trump more.
They're taking two tacks, right?
Exactly.
They're making him more diminutive, right? With the pejorative of weird and strange and all these sort of ways of diminishing him. Even Obama talking about, he's obsessed with crowd size. Yeah. It's all meant to put him in a box.
Make him small.
But at the other hand, we heard Joe Biden, who was talking about democracy hanging by a thread and the grave threat of Trump. So it goes both ways.
But that's almost a change in strategy, because I do think Biden has done that. Biden has been he is this, one of this. And Biden
threat,
did make him big. And Harris's strategy seems to be to diminish him and laugh him off and kind of, and we'll see if that continues. But it does feel like that is a shift. I don't know if it's strategically or tactically, but that is a really good point.
I mean, there's also, the skill of her, what we know about her and how she prepared for congressional hearings. I've been saying it for a long time, and I think more people are getting familiar with some of these clips of her grilling Brett Kavanaugh, grilling Bill Barr, Jeff Sessions. Everybody's seeing those. And in fact, I think in her walk-up video, they played some of them. I was there in real time and saw those things, and I've been telling people she comes prepared. That's something we know from even her congressional staff, that they would practice these things. So that part we know. I also think when Hillary debated Trump, she was at a disadvantage because, no one had gone through that before.
Right.
In fact, no one expected him to even get past primary season, let alone a debate. So I think that there wasn't a playbook that Hillary's team could have looked at and prepared, even though she was prepared in those things. But they didn't know how to go up against him because he had not.
Trump was breaking all the rules.
Right. Yes. And it was so shocking to a lot of established politicians that, they never kind of got it together. However, Harris knows what Trump could be like on a debate stage. So she's going into this with an advantage that her predecessors may not have had.
That's such a great point. So the debate is
September 10th.
And coming up around that is early voting starts happening as well.
It's crazy. I think early voting might even start before the first debate. It's really wild that it's not an election day anymore. It is like an election season.
Yeah.
And the race had been so static for so long. It felt like there was really no movement with Biden and Trump, and both of them sort of unpopular. And there has now been this like earthquake where the tectonic plates of American politics have shifted, and it still feels like there's like aftershocks and they're still settling. And it makes our job as political journalists fun because we don't really know how they'll settle. And it's, how will the debate? I mean, it's going to be
fun is one word.
Although, honestly, as busy as this has been, this season has been, I mean, even as a journalist, it's just, we're losing sleep. We have probably aged in the election cycle more so than many other journalists who got to cover politics. But at the same time, I am truly fascinated because every time we report something, we just don't know what's around the corner. And I get into that. I don't know about you guys, but I really enjoy that part of reporting is, we can't tell you what's going to happen. We're learning, and then we can relay that to you.
And it's so fascinating to hear how people are interpreting it, how voters are interpreting it, and how they're taking it. And we're going to keep digging into that, of course, in the coming weeks. The other thing that'll be coming up in the short term is Kamala Harris's first major sit-down interview, James, since getting the nomination.
She said she'd do something by the end of the month. I think on August 8th, she said she would do a sit-down interview. And I think, when you're preparing for a sit-down interview, in some ways that's similar to preparing for a debate, right?
Yeah.
It's the same kind of questions that could come up. So
how not to get ruffled, how not to get, how not to say you can see Russia from your house or whatever.
I mean,
think of what newspapers you read. Media sources. I'm thinking of all the Sarah Palin trip ups. Yeah.
The challenge is that she's now put it off long enough.
It'll be
so
really heightened. Yeah.
And if she had just talked to Lester Holt the day after Joe Biden dropped out, I think it would have defeated.
Oh, but journalists always want more.
That's true.
They're an insatiable bunch. Never good enough. Right. So stay with us. We are about to meet two wonderful journalists, friends of ours, Carmela Boykin and Joseph Ferguson. Joseph is a friend of the pod. He's been on before. This will be Carmela's first visit with us. They are what I like to call the masters of the Washington Post universe. They create content across all Washington Post platforms. And they're going to join us to talk about their takeaways from the convention and how Democrats are trying to harness the power of social media influencers and content creators here this week. Stay with us. This is Sidebar from the Washington Post. Joining us now are our friends and colleagues, Carmela Boykin and Joseph Ferguson. You may have seen their work on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. Along with Dave Jorgensen, they are the creators of the Washington Post universe. I like to think that it's Dave, Carmela, and Joseph's world, and we're all just living in it. Welcome to you both. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us. This is awesome.
Thanks for having me back.
So I want to start by playing one of the videos that your teams created this week. Carmela, tell us about it.
Yes, so this is a fact-checking day one of some of the politicians' statements. Credit to Dave Jorgensen for creating this format and to Glenn Kessler, who wrote the original article. All of our content is based off of Washington Post reporting, but this is day one fact check.
All right, let's roll it.
Fact-checking day one of the DNC.
We have 1,000 billionaires in America. You know what their average tax rate they pay? 8.2%.
Biden is referencing a 2021 White House study that uses a hypothetical tax system. According to the IRS, taxpayers who grossed over $77 million were taxed an average of 23.7% in 2020. That's a lot of money. Let's talk about lead.
Removing every lead pipe from schools and homes so every child can drink clean water.
Biden did get $15 billion with a bipartisan infrastructure law for lead pipe replacement, but there are nearly 10 million lead pipes that supply U.S. homes with drinking water. The EPA estimates replacing them could cost at least $45 billion. On to Medicare, but we're not eligible yet. Okay, but other people are.
We tried to expand Social Security and Medicare. Donald Trump tried to cut them year after year after year.
Trump did propose budget cuts to Medicare when in office, but they were to extend Medicare's ability to pay its debts. And many of the proposals were taken from Barack Obama, who failed to pass them in Congress. For Social Security, Trump did keep his promise not to touch those benefits. While noting Trump isn't always consistent on policies, he's also repeatedly said he won't cut benefits to Medicare or Social Security if elected again.
A Washington Post fact-check video by Carmela Boykin, who is our guest right now. So, Carmela, how have audiences received this?
These have been the response to these have been really good. We've been really pleasantly surprised. As Joseph knows, we work on the internet, so everyone has a comment on your work. But the comments on these are people being really grateful that we're actually fact-checking politicians, and we're doing it both at the DNC and the RNC, so definitely showing balance as well.
Yeah. How do you pick topics to focus on this week, Joseph?
Things that I've been focusing on are really like bigger picture questions about the DNC or the state of our politics and like the party here overall. And trying to find interesting, cool ways to like describe things and explain why this thing is happening, because nothing happens in a vacuum.
Yeah. So we are on the highest level of the United Center. It's like the penthouse suite level, also known as the nosebleeds, let's be honest. But it really is this incredible bird's eye view. You can sort of see it behind us if you're watching us on YouTube right now, that we can see everything from above. And it rings the whole United Center, and the suites next to us are creator studios. What does that mean, Carmela?
That's a really interesting question, because Joseph and I are creators, but we're not necessarily in the creator suites. But the people we've been seeing next to us are creators that we've seen online. So V from Under the Desk News, she's been on our Washington Post account, which has been really great. And so watching them go live with other creators, they have a lot of gear in those rooms as well. So they have tripods, they have ring lights, they have little tiny mics, all the things that are like staples of making social media videos.
Yeah, so you guys are with the Washington Post team. So you're like,
oh yeah.
So you've accessed like the floor passes that traditional media have. But what's been so fascinating is that the DNC has really tried to let in creators, right? So people who aren't necessarily going by the same sort of journalistic code of conduct or ethics that we might. They have their own way of producing and doing things, James.
Yeah, they might be wearing Harris hats, and a lot of them are wouldn't describe themselves as journalists the way that you guys are. And they really reach an audience of people who don't like reflexively turn on the news as we think of it, but who are interested in the world. The fact that Carmela's point on the fact checks is so true. I think that there is this like yearning for factual information, and sometimes I think there's like stereotypes about young people, but I think that there is this desire to know like what's true, what's not true, and a lot of those people are getting their news from TikTok.
You know, Rhonda, I was seeing really influential Democrats and people whose voices here are kind of unique. Maxwell Frost, young congressman from Florida, Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, going to the creator suites, doing the interviews with people with like ring lights and like tiny phones. We're not talking about like the huge infrastructure of a network.
That's right. You know, one of the things that I've been thinking of too is, you know, I cover the Hill, and I've been covering for the last few cycles how TikTok especially has been a platform that there have been laws to try to curb its use in the United States. But I also know a lot of members of Congress and politicians also know that it is a platform to reach a lot of the people that they need to win their elections. So there is a bit of that tension of what do we do with this? But it does seem like the DNC, as well as the RNC, when we cover that as well, and even at the debates, I've seen that social media presence has been embraced a lot more than I've ever seen. And I think that that speaks to a lot of politicians are realizing the moment they're in, and that is a part of the news digestion that a lot of Americans have.
Absolutely.
The politics are fascinating because this week, Pete Buttigieg, you know, who you think of as this young politician, he finally went on TikTok and started a TikTok account. And, you know, obviously there was the congressional vote, and it's to ban TikTok in the U.S. or to force them to sell, and that's caught up in court. But I think that there is a recognition that it's sort of here to stay, and that this is how you reach tens of millions of people who aren't, you know, watching MSNBC. And even Trump's on TikTok now. Trump, in fact, has done a complete 180 from 2020 when he was trying to ban the platform. Now fully embracing it.
So speaking of that, Joseph, you were at the RNC in Milwaukee. Yeah. How has the presence of social media influencers and creators been here versus there? And also sort of the recognition of their influence by the Republican National Committee, the Democratic National Committee.
Yeah, I think like it's a real changing of the guard just to have them at both. I think that like having anyone walking around with like a tripod and a phone and trying to make anything, I think is a real recognition that being given floor passes and press passes is amazing. But I also think that the DNC has given a lot more infrastructure. Carmela said it earlier, but I think it bears some repeating. Like the fact that they're putting their money where their mouth is, in a sense, by giving ring lights, by giving tripods, by giving mics, and really helping these creators tell the stories that they want to tell here at the DNC. I think it's a really interesting time that we're in, and I'm interested to see what the 2028 convention will look like, even with this going even further. You know,
I expect you guys to have like cameras implanted as like your third eye, and you're just like broadcasting to me live as I sit on my couch.
Use my brain to edit. Like it'll just be so much.
Exactly. So like there've been some kind of like, I mean, it's these juxtapositions of you guys down with like these esteemed and storied broadcasters, you know, elbow to elbow, right?
Yeah, like we were down there shooting yesterday at our media stand-up, and Carmela was shooting one of her fact checks, and right next to us was Chuck Todd doing a hit and doing what he does best. And she was there right next to her doing what she does best, both talking to our respective audiences and both giving them the news in the way that they understand. And I think just the juxtaposition was really great to see.
And also, like, you're totally validating. Like, yeah, you're right there.
Absolutely. It's a very interesting experience, too, because, of course, as a journalist, you're trained to be, like, professional and everything. But to best reach our audience, they respond best to being authentic and maybe having some quips. So I wear sunglasses that are big and white. They're called clout goggles. I use fluffy pens because I think it's fun. And it definitely gets some stares when we're down on the floor, when we're next to other journalists who are doing like traditional stand-ups. But when we're down there, people are coming up to us and saying they appreciate our work, which is really validating to meet people in person.
And the truth is that you often have a bigger audience than some of those traditional broadcasters in terms of the number of people that you're reaching. Not just that they're the right kind of people who are going to decide the election, but just in raw volume.
You've been recognized here?
A couple of times, yeah. But I think that tells us that we're doing our work well. Because, like, this is the prime location for people to recognize us. People who are really interested in politics. They want to know more. They want to consume it in a fun way. So...
yeah, it was really interesting getting recognized at the RNC2 and here, because like it shows like the depth and the breadth of who we can reach, right? Like we're reaching people across the aisle, going everywhere. People who just want news and information can come to us for good, entertaining time.
I want to give a sense in how far the world has moved in terms of the recognition of who holds the power. Here's one of Wednesday night's speakers, Carlos Eduardo Espina, who's only 25, but he's an activist. He's a lawyer. He runs his own nonprofit, and he reaches millions of people on social media. He was one of the speakers last night. Let's listen.
And if 2 decades ago, when my parents immigrated to College Station, Texas, you told them that one day their son would reach 14 million followers on social media, graduate law school, and speak at the Democratic National Convention, they might not believe you.
I love this because the American dream has evolved, Carmela.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting that you can even be like in a professional profession. You can be a lawyer and a doctor and a surgeon and whatever. But, like, are you on TikTok? Do you know how to make trends based on your content? Like, that's how you get social clout now, which is so interesting.
Yeah, it's not the Herbert Hoover days, James.
Yeah, I marveled at that. You know, I heard it, and it was a real reflection of the moment. I also noticed, I mean, there was something sort of in tension. Barack Obama now, in 2008, he was the young guy. Now he's the 60-something
seasoned.
His hair is so gray, right? Yes.
But he was like, he was talking about leaf blowers and kind of get off my lawn stuff, and I thought it was a great speech. But then he said, life isn't about how many likes you get, and that clearly is his view. And he, as for advanced as he was when he was running for president 16 years ago, I think that he, in many ways, is now out of step with where his daughter's generation is.
I mean, if you remember the fight that they had over whether or not he should have his BlackBerry, he would be the first president to have a cell phone. And I think even with Twitter, he was the first president to have a Twitter presence. So yeah, it shows you how far everything's come.
Go ahead, Carmela.
I think that mirrors in content creation as well, though, because, of course, everyone can look at our content and see the likes and the views and etc. But one of the things that Dave really hammers home is, are you having fun? And, like, how good is the story that you're telling? Right. How are people actually responding to what you're saying? Because that's where the value for our team really comes in.
Because, I mean, audiences can almost automatically tell when you're being inauthentic or when you're miserable. So, like, if you don't look like you're having a great time, and if this isn't, like, a really useful piece of information, then it not only is it like not fun to make, but it's not going to be received well either. So like you said, Dave really tries to hammer home, have a really fun time while making this really informative piece of content.
Boy, Dave had better be watching and listening to this, because otherwise,
So should the rest of the newsroom.
Yeah. Yeah. So have Democrats have they been successful at trying to use like pop culture moments or moments from this and get them out on social media? Have they mastered the game?
I think definitely looking at the Harris campaign, they have a very solid team. And the rate at which they're churning out content, someone's like, or a whole team is working incredibly hard. And you even see that in some of the videos that they're showing here in the arena of some of those like viral worthy or like meme kind of style of editing where it's like Joseph will tell you, it's retention editing. It's wanting to keep people engaged. It's taking pauses for humor and adding those in, even at a political arena like this.
Is there such a thing as trying too hard?
I think as long as you're remaining authentic, it's trying too hard when now the audience can tell that you are uncomfortable. If you're uncomfortable, then we're uncomfortable, and everyone's uncomfortable. But I feel like if you're confident in what you're doing, it totally works.
Because like there's the horseshoe theory of trying too hard, where just becomes camp now. Where we're like, oh, like the fact that it's overdone and it's too much is kind of the point now, and that's cool and interesting too. So it's like as long as you just like own whatever it is you're doing, then like that's what it is. Then that's good. But if you're trying to be cool and lay back about it, then that's not.
So when it's brat summer and then we see John Tester eating like a brat and being like, it's brat summer, is that trying too hard? Or has it gone the horseshoe?
It's over by then, right?
Well, I think it might be trying too hard. You got to really lean into it. Have like 4 brats everywhere and be like, now it's brat summer. Like, you got to lean into it, whatever it is.
Well, and what's amazing to me is that the Harris people, and maybe they've added some new ones in, but it's the Biden people, and the content that they're creating for Kamala Harris just does feel more authentic. Like Brat Summer, like obviously wouldn't have worked for Joe Biden, right? And maybe
maybe it might.
Maybe it might have. But I think about that, or maybe like I would love to know, like in the approvals chain in Wilmington, Delaware, where the campaign headquarters is, like. I covered the Mitt Romney campaign in 2012, and I learned after the campaign that every single tweet that went out under Mitt Romney's name needed 27 different people to sign off on it. Right. And they were like, boring.
Wow.
Like, and then Trump comes along 4 years later and just like, obviously there's no approval process. And so, I think in like the Biden campaign, you're trying to capture his voice, his personality. He's 81. They had the ice cream and the sunglasses to work with, but they didn't have a lot else to work with.
It reminds me, it feels like they tried to do some of that with Dark Brandon.
Yeah.
And that was their pitch to like almost redefine him. And that never really left
never
the ground.
Took off.
Right. Especially not to the extent that Brat Summer did. So like you can see the start of something there, and then it just feels like they've been unleashed under this new campaign.
Is it generational, though, that you now have a candidate who's younger? She's likely more familiar with social media, and it doesn't feel as forced? Mm-hmm. Or can an older candidate, because there are many of them, I mean, look at the average age of a senator or a House member, can an older candidate also embrace social media in the ways that, young voters would be like, okay, they get it?
Well, my favorite person to follow on Twitter
Chuck
is
Grassley.
Chuck Grassley.
I knew you were going to say Chuck Grassley.
And it is because it's authentic. He's like the oldest senator. I think he's like 87,
yes, he is,
maybe 88.
Yeah.
And like he like is like, here is my Dairy Queen order, and I'm trying this blizzard, and then he's like, look, the corn is this high, and like I cannot get enough Chuck Grassley content. His day at the state fair, like it's clearly him.
Just trust your staff. I think at the end of the day,
that's
too.
It. Yeah.
I think you can hire people who know what they're doing, and I think that like there's a bit of it like it might not make sense to you right now, but I'm gonna press the post button and it's gonna be really good. So I think that you got to trust your staff with that. So I think to answer your question, it can happen, but there has to be that level of familiarity there and like rapport to actually let
I will say, Rhonda, I love that you think of Kamala Harris as young. Amen to that. 59 years old. Tim Walz is 60.
In the presidency, that's like a baby. That's an infant. In any of our politics, really. Yeah. But I was also thinking, too, when you said staff, and I know you all may know this, but like the average age of a congressional staffer is like mid-20s.
Yeah.
So they're talking to their peers. They're getting information. I mean, it's not even information they may be seeking, but their peers are letting them know what will work, what will land. So that's another thing, too.
one of my like golden rules for making stuff is like make the stuff that you want to see. And like if you were already on the internet scrolling, looking at things, and you find something that's funny, odds are someone else is gonna think that's funny too. So like as long as you can do that in a skillful way, kind of like maybe make it your own, then it'll resonate somewhere.
So what moments are zinging around the internet successfully, really getting a lot of attention outside the confines of the United Center?
I think one of the big ones last night, and I knew it as soon as I saw it, was Gus Walls when he stood up and was crying at his father. I knew, I was like, this is going to get clipped, and it's either going to go really excellent or it's not going to go that great. And fortunately for him, it's going really well for him, but that's definitely a huge one spreading around.
Why don't we watch that in case people haven't seen it yet?
Hope, Gus, and Gwen, you are my entire world, and I love you. I'm letting you in on how we started a family because this is a big part about what this election is about.
If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast app, as Tim Walz spoke, the camera panned to Hope, his daughter who's 23, and Gus, his son who's 17, who just started sobbing and said, "That's my dad." And it showed so much emotion.
Yeah, it was a really powerful moment. And again, when you see it, it's one of those things where you just hope that it's going to, for the sake of, like, he's young and going viral for something like that can be harmful. It can be scary. And so I was heartened to see that people were being nice to him on the internet.
The Walz parents say that Gus has ADHD, an anxiety disorder, and a nonverbal learning disorder. And so one thing that the internet was also embracing today was seeing someone neurodivergent celebrated and part of a family and part of, like, that's what America looks like, right? So that's also something that made that moment so exciting and dynamic. What else has stood out to you, Joseph?
Yeah, I thought the Michelle Obama's Black Jobs comment really stood out to me. And, like, not because I think she had a lot of, like, really good lines in that speech. So I was interested to see which one was going to really resonate, because I knew something was going to go viral. But that one, I think, got the most raucous applause. I think that one you had to take the biggest applause break. So I think...
Let's play it. Yeah, let's listen.
I want to know, who's going to tell him that the job he's currently seeking might just be one of those black jobs?
What is it about that makes it so memorable?
I think it does a lot of things in one sentence. I think that it speaks to the new Democratic, not new, but the embrace of different candidates. I think that there's, for a long time, been a very strict view of what a politician would look like, what a successful one would look like. So I think it embraces that attitude. I think, obviously, her husband being the first black president, and then passing the torch on to another potentially black president, I think means a lot as well. And I think her saying it here with a bunch of Democrats means a lot, too. So I think it was just a bunch of really great things coming together in one incredible line.
And talking about internet culture, we've seen a lot of black professionals talk about how they love their black jobs, taking Trump's words and kind of making it into a joke. We saw gymnast Simone Biles talk about, "I love my black job." And so I think by Michelle Obama including that in her speech, it's another way of using the internet and knowing that, okay, people are going to take this and they're going to run with it.
Final question for you, Carmela and Joseph. What has surprised you the most about covering the DNC, or sort of been the most illuminating to you? Carmela?
I think one of the most illuminating things is learning how many different ways that stories can be told, how many different ways the stories at the DNC can be told. You can do it on social media, you can do it in professional settings, and they all reach different audiences, but I think they all come together to tell a very similar story, which I think is valuable to tell people what's going on. What does the DNC even mean? That's really valuable.
Yeah, I've been really interested in our audience's reaction to our coverage. I think that, like, with the fact checks and with our, we told our audience we were going to be here on Monday. And throughout every video in the comment section, they've been saying, "Where's this fact check? Have you guys seen this? I want to hear more about that." So it's a really good symbiotic relationship we have, where we can, like, make the content they want to see and feel fulfilled with the stuff that we're making.
Yeah, it's a communication.
Yeah.
Rhonda, what has surprised you this week?
I mean, really, what hasn't? The list is so long, but I also think that points to, if this DNC was a month ago, it would have been a different shape. It would have been a different form. I was talking to a member of the Senate who he was on stage earlier in the week, and he was telling me about how much they moved his speech around because there was just so much jam-packed content. And I think that would be sort of a surprise, maybe not surprise, but just a notable moment this week that Democrats came together. It may have been the 11th hour. We now have weeks and days until the election, but it seems like they're making that work for them.
This was not 1968. I think I expected the protests to be bigger, and I really admired the professionalism of the Chicago Police Department. I was watching someone who was trying to kind of provoke a police officer, and he was just standing there and keeping calm. I don't know that would have happened in 1968 when there were
no, they had orders to go
just
after them,
beat up the protesters, and so it's been nice to see peaceful protests, people expressing their First Amendment rights, but also being safe and the protests being underwhelming from what I think we expected coming in.
Well, there are just days and weeks left until debates, early voting. All of these things are happening and coming at us very quickly. That's all for us from Chicago and the United Center. A special thanks to Carmela and Joseph, and as always, Rhonda and James. The three of us will be back with you next week from our Washington, D.C. studios as we track all the dynamic changes of this election. Please do join us, and a reminder that you can find us in your favorite podcast app or watch us on YouTube. Just look for The Washington Post in your YouTube feed. See you next week.